So we're into the third week, which is power, and power that expresses through us as strength. And that comes in many forms. As the third attribute of God, power expresses through us as strength. And when we think of power in connection with God, we may envision the Almighty throwing mountain-splitting lightning bolts. Have any of you ever come close to a mountain-splitting lightning bolt in your life? It's pretty powerful. We had I think I've shared the story with you, but our house in Evergreen, we lived at 7,600 feet, and it was struck by lightning. The storm came in, I think it was about there for some reason, every afternoon at 4 o'clock, you can almost set your watch by it. We would get a major storm come through, a thunderstorm. And while we were there, we saw 3 houses burn to the ground, as a result of that. And these are nice houses. But the storm was coming, so I decided to record the storm on my computer because I like the sound of storms normally. Well, a bolt of lightning hit a tree that was growing through our deck. They built the deck around the tree. It was a big ponderosa pine, a huge tree. The lightning came down around it, jumped from a broken branch to the house, knocked a hole the size of a basketball through the house, came through the kitchen. Beth was laying on the couch in the afternoon when it came through. She saw whatever it was come through, the apparition, and it hit the kitchen electrical outlets and just fried the computer I was working on. It fried every computer, fried everything in the house. And I've never heard a sound so loud in my life. It just it made you cringe. If anything will make you go to your knees besides God, that's it. And it's so we think of power for a very good reason, because it is power. It's a manifestation of power. But when we're thinking about power in relation to God, it's a very different thought. It includes that, but we don't want those kinds of things happening in our lives on a regular basis. At least I don't. I would rather take my power in smaller chunks, in terms of inspiration or just something a little milder than that. But we think of it in that way, the power of the Almighty, the all power of God. And that's, one way. We're including all manifestations of power. But when we think of it in a spiritual sense in our own personal life, we want to bring the amperage down a little bit, I think. So we'll do that. And also, when we think of powerful people, we may think of those who possess great wealth or hold influential positions, such as a political figure. If you read, almost any media, you will, when they refer to powerful people, they're usually talking about people with a lot of money or a lot of, very high position. And again, that's part of the manifestation of power. It's there's no limit to it. We can think of it in all kinds of ways. But what's interesting about that is spiritual power is quiet. Empowerment from on high is the silent impartation of spiritual revelation. We should not assume a person is spiritually empowered because of the position they hold. The exact opposite may be the case. And in my own experience, I have encountered this many times. People in positions of power, when you get to know them or see beyond the position, see beyond the facade, they have often gone after that position because they themselves feel powerless. They need the position to feel the power that they're seeking. And this is, of course, a total judgment on my part, but it's my experience. It's what I have seen. A lot of times in organizations, people that feel powerless themselves will get on committees and they will rise and rise and rise to the top as much as they can. And that's one of the problems with corporations sometimes, not always, but sometimes, is that people who have the power may themselves feel powerless. And that's not a good combination. It's the ones that are self-confident that ought to be standing at the helm, that work the best in situations, and you can't always tell who that is, or a person can very well do the job, but becoming from a place of low self-esteem. And so some of the judgments they make may not be for the highest of the company, but for protecting their position. And that's what happens. That's one of the deteriorations of that structure sometimes. It doesn't always happen, but we see it plenty of times. When we look at our average politician, what do we think of them? It's like they rank fairly low in the almost as low as ministers for the most part. But we don't necessarily associate positions like that with integrity. I would say spiritual power expresses also as integrity. It's self-governing in a person, like they will make a choice not because they're not going to get caught, but because it's the right thing to do. And that's what we really want, in our leadership, and we don't get that always. We get people that are interested in protecting their own position rather than protecting the good of what they represent. And that's common. That's been, that's gone on forever. It's not anything new to our generation by any means. But spiritual power manifests through us as strength. For example, it may require a great deal of strength to admit we are powerless to resolve an addiction or to control a difficult situation. Now we're moving into the notion of empowerment from on high. We've all felt powerless over something in our life, over some problem that we've had. And when we find ourselves in a position like that, the reason we feel powerless is because we're looking at what we have at hand. Maybe we are confronted with a financial issue. We don't have enough money to pay it. Maybe we don't have the legal expertise. Maybe we don't have just the knowledge to deal with whatever the issue might be. And so we feel powerless. And so to become empowered from on high, it's a shift in how we're thinking of ourselves. We don't look at the situation from the basis of what we have, but from the basis of what we are as spiritual beings. And this is where we kick in our spiritual learning, our spiritual principles, because we're drawing upon something we don't normally use, and that is spiritual power that's not based on intellectual understanding. It's based on an intuitive knowing that we're connected to something much greater than ourselves. So that's usually the last place we go when we have a challenge. The first thing we do is we look at all of our resources. When Israel was confronted with Goliath, the great mountain, the great giant, classic story. They all were looking at how big they were and how big he was, and that they didn't have a chance against this giant. So David was not looking at that. He was looking at the fact that he was, as a inheritor of the promised land, was being insulted by this giant. And so he drew upon what he knew and what he had. What the army tried to do, what they all tried to do, is cover him in armor. All the armor that should have normally protected him, and it said he felt awkward. He couldn't handle it. So he cast it off, and he got his sling and rock and all that. You know the story. But that idea it applies to us in that way, as we tend to see these giants out there, and we look at our army, we look at the size of the giant, and we weigh all this out, and we say, well, I can't handle that. And so the giant comes out every day and mocks us, until the answer comes in a way that nobody would expect. And that is from a young boy, a shepherd that knows how to throw rocks. And that's I love that story for that reason, because it reminds us, that whatever is out there, whatever is intimidating us, is really we're looking at it from where we are, just as human beings, or looking where we are as just our human resources. We're saying, I don't have enough to confront this. I don't have enough to do this. So when we stop and say, maybe I don't, but I'm connected to something that does, then I open my mind. It's a shift in perception. And sometimes, in fact, all the time, that's all it takes, is a shift in perception to get me inspired to deal with this in a constructive way. And that's usually doesn't take much more than a little rock to fix it. And that little rock is really just a thought that we can do this, that I'm connected to this greater resource, and together we can handle this. So we associate empowerment from on high with vision, the kind that evokes the understanding that we're more than the sum of our perceived resources. And I put a picture of a cat up here because that's just generally how they look. They know they're okay. They know they've got what it takes to do whatever needs to be done. And so they just, in an instant, 1 minute they can be upset about something, next minute they look like this. They are plugged into that. And we are too. But we have been culturally programmed to unplug ourselves from this reality, from this larger context. We have separated ourselves mentally from God, from our source. And we put, God in the church, we put God in the sky, we put God in places where we are not necessarily. But the animal carries it around, carries that consciousness around. People ask if animals have souls, and there's no doubt in my mind that what they don't have, they have the soul, what they don't have is the imagination that the human being has to eliminate God, to take God out of the equation. I think animals live with that conscious awareness all the time. So much so, it's just part of their makeup. And they respond to their situations as needed and all of that. But we think things through. We look at what the arsenal that we have in our pocket, and see how capable we are of handling that situation that arises. When we think of a power greater than ourselves, we do not think of a power outside of ourselves. It's very important. But as a larger spiritual context that includes us. Empowered by this vision sparks new thoughts, new feelings of greater possibilities, and new strength to take needed action and move forward in creative ways. I've had issues with that idea that the support group community uses, that about this idea of a power greater than myself, because I've always felt that we're connected to that power and that we are one with that power, so it's not a power greater than myself. What I'm doing when I make that statement is to realize I'm expanding my thought to a power that includes myself. If it doesn't include myself, it's not going to address my problem. So it's a kind of a semantics issue, but we just want to make sure we're not separating ourselves from God when we say something like this, because I like the term, I like the phrase, a power greater than myself. When I use that term, I think of it as a power greater than the I, the ego, that I was talking about earlier. It is that limited perception, self-perception, that excludes God, excludes this unlimited source of power. And we do that very easily. We slip into that very easily. The bigger the giant is, the more likely we are to do that. And the longer it takes us to slip back into this awareness that it's not just my resources that are here to deal with this. Because as we include ourselves in this power greater than ourselves, that inspires ideas, inspires new ways of thinking. And you probably have noticed that if you are having a down day, having a challenging moment, that sometimes it can be just a word. It can be picking up a book or something, reading a line, and that can change the whole way you think and feel and trigger like breaking the dam of negativity. And it allows your thinking to get back on track, and your feeling, the feeling of knowing this too shall pass, this too will work out like everything else has. So it's an important shift to make, that we're not praying to something, we're praying from the awareness of our oneness with God, and that's a huge difference. If you're praying to it, it's separate from you, it has to give you the answer. If you're praying from your awareness of this, your oneness with God, you are opening yourself to be that conduit, to be that channel. And how does that happen? It happens through inspiration, through an inner knowing. And yes, things fall in place, things happen. They come together in an outer way, and that's what we want. But to me, I find the most devastating aspect of any challenge, any problem, is what it does to me emotionally and mentally. It sends me into a dark place, sends me into a place I don't want to be. It ruins my day. It ruins the way I feel about life. And that's what I want to heal first. And that's what this does for us when we realize, okay, the answer's not here right now, but it is here. It is here in potential. And it's working through me now. That opens me to new ideas, new ways of thinking of this situation. And that's a very important shift to make in our awareness. So we've all had moments when we felt we lacked the strength to take even one more step. But from such a place, we also know that it can take only a few simple inspirational words of encouragement, spoken or written, to open the floodgates of power. Just a slight shift in the way we're looking at a situation can bring us strength we didn't know we had. And that's what I just said, basically. But that's, to me, that's what prayer is about. It's making an adjustment, making a shift in perception. It doesn't get God to act. You know, part of the success of prayer is knowing that God's already in action. It's already happening. The whole universe is working. We're not starting anything here. We're acknowledging what is happening, and we're putting ourselves in alignment with that. Prayer is to make an adjustment, to align ourselves with the way this divine flow is working. And so we're not invoking power. We're becoming aware of the power that exists already. And when that happens, we feel the strength. We feel it expressed through us as strength. And it changes the way you feel almost immediately. To me, that's always been the criteria for how do I know my prayer's answered? By how you feel. It's by how you feel. The change may not occur. You may not see a visible change when you're praying for something, but you know something has happened. You know you're putting yourself in the way of the answer. And when you can look at that same problem from a perspective where you feel, you know that greater good is now unfolding, that the solution is now coming forward, that's when your prayer is answered. If you stay with that, you'll see it outwork. You'll see it work out in ways maybe you are expecting, maybe ways you're not. I think most of the time I have watched it work out in ways I was not expecting. But, you know, the bottom line is it worked out. And that's what we want. But it's not like when we pray or when we affirm or do anything that we're causing new action from God. This is a very important idea. We are working with the activity of God, with the action, the expressive action of God. And instead of fearing and blocking, we are opening our expectation level to the outworking of that energy that is unfolding through us in very beautiful ways. So like all spiritual resources, like all our spiritual resources, power is inherent in the soul. God's power is our underlying unlimited source. When we feel weak, inadequate to meet that threatening challenge, we become still, take our mind off the appearance, and open ourselves to empowerment from on high. And I have the young lady looking up, not to the sky, but to away from the problem, away from the issue. That's the symbology I wanted to get here. Because what do? Usually when we have a problem, we laser focus on that. We look right at it and we rehash it over and over and over how bad it is. That's what Israel was doing as they stood before Goliath. Every day he'd come out, get their attention. Look at me, I'm bigger than you. And they would buy into that and just do it on a repeated basis. And again, that's part of the story. That's what we tend to do. We look at why the thing can't be done, why the thing can't be solved. And this little kid comes along with a sling and a rock is symbolic of that kind of that little kid in us that Jesus said becomes a child. It's don't look at the appearance like the adult does. Look at it like the child looks at it. All possibilities. The child doesn't know why he can't overcome the giant. Never been taught that. You have to grow up and get your training to learn why you can't overcome a giant, which is why all the experts in the militia didn't do that, didn't handle Goliath. And this is not saying anything against armies or anything else. It is just pointing out that it is our training that robs us of our power. It doesn't rob us of our power. It robs us of our use of power or misplaces our power. And we become weaker. We lose our strength. And that's, Samson thought his power was in his hair. He was a Philistine, and the idea of growing your hair long, that was what empowered you and marked your rank and so on. So Delilah comes along and trims his hair and then leads him around like a puppy. Well, he found he had strength he didn't know he had. And that's another good story, which I'm not going to get into, but at first he put his power in his position, and his position was marked by the length of his hair. That was taken away. He realized he had more power than he realized. It's not in his position. It was in who he was, and he pushed the pillars down and destroyed everybody, like every good Christian ought to do. So that's there's all kinds of stories like that in the Old Testament. As you know, it's a very gory, bloody encounter when you get into it. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. And it does come from a very barbaric era. There's no question about it. So we have to overlook this when we're reading these stories, because there's a lot of truth in all of it. Okay. So we wait in silence and in peace for the infilling. If it does not come immediately, we get up and go about our life. It is often in unexpected moments that we experience our desired renewal of strength, as our little character here is all excited by the idea that just came to him. But that's how it often happens in my life, in my experience, is, again, I don't always see the solution pop out in front of me so I can cheer for it, so I can say, look how wonderful this is. It's usually a shift in perception. Something in me knows, and I regain my strength in knowing that this too shall pass, or this greater good is now unfolding through me. It's usually a very quiet revelation at first, but it's always a thrill when we do see the actual giant taken down. We want that. But the first giant that has to go is the one that's up here. And that's a pretty important metaphysical lesson that we all learn. It's not so much what's going on out there as it is what's going on here. So we open ourselves, in being empowered from on high, is to know we are already connected with all the power of God, that is the one reality in us. And that knowing begins to express through us as the strength we need to take the next step. Thank you for watching this week's program. If you enjoyed this video, please share it with others. We want to reach as many people as we can, and we appreciate your help. If you'd like to help support this ministry, just click the donate card at the top right-hand corner of your screen. Your financial support means a lot to us. We have many subjects in our video lineup, so feel free to take a look. If there's a topic you don't see and would like me to address, just put it in the comment section. I'd love to know what's on your mind. To subscribe to this channel, simply click our logo. Thanks again for your interest in Independent Unity, and have a wonderful week.